So for this sweet treat, Cake Pops, I'm going to be making cake, frosting, and then showing you how to coat and decorate your Cake Pops in chocolate and crumbled cookies or sprinkles or whatever you choose to decorate. But if you're like me and you've been to your local grocery store, they may not have the lollipop sticks. So we're actually going to make our Cake Pops without the pop part. So still going to taste excellent, you just won't be able to hold it up on a stick. You see in front of you everything that we're going to need today in order to make the Cake Pops and the frosting that actually makes the cake stick together. So for the cake, we do need 4 ounces of bittersweet or dark chocolate that's been melted, and very importantly, that is cooler. It does still need to be liquid, but if it's hot, then it's actually going to ruin our batter. So we want it to be like room temperature-ish. We will need 6 tablespoons of unsalted butter that's also at room temperature, and I will give in the description the milliliters and the grams for all of these things so that my European friends will be able to use this recipe easily. We need 3/4 of a cup of packed light brown sugar. We need 2 large eggs that are at room temperature. We need 1 1/4 cup of all-purpose white flour. We need 3/4 of a teaspoon of both baking soda and baking powder and 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt. We also need 1 cup of 2% reduced fat milk. That'll be half vol here in Belgium. I'm actually using soy milk today just because I had it open and left over. And then finally we will need 1 teaspoon of pure vanilla extract. Now, when we get to our frosting, all that we really need to make a good buttercream frosting is a little bit of milk, powdered sugar, and unsalted room temperature butter. But we'll get to that later. In just a second, it will be time to mix our cake. Alright, it's time for the first phase of our Cake Pops, which is making our cake. In case you hadn't guessed by the ingredient list, I'm making chocolate cake. So I'm going to need my melted chocolate off here to the side, but just like with our previous cupcakes and muffins, we're going to start with our butter and our sugars, and we're going to cream those. So I have here my butter that needs to go into my big old mixing bowl. There we are, and then I also need to add my sugar. And we are going to attach the paddle to our mixer. And we are going to let this beat first on low just until everything's incorporated. Then we'll kick it up to medium for 2 to 3 minutes. We want pale and fluffy texture to our creamed mixture. Now here we have to take a quick break from our main mixer in order to deal with our eggs. This chocolate cake recipe is so delicious and so fluffy, but it's only that way because of the way that we treat our 2 room temperature eggs. You can see here that I have 2 bowls, and in one bowl there are just yolks, and in one bowl there are just egg whites. So I've separated my eggs. I'm going to set the egg whites aside for now, and we're going to treat these yolks. What I need to do, I also have a hand mixer here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mix these yolks for several minutes, and they're going to turn pale and kind of creamy. They won't poof up a lot, but they will definitely change color and texture, and that's what I want. So I'm going to beat these egg yolks until they're pale and creamy looking. Now you can see a total change in these egg yolks. They are very nearly white colored and very, very creamy. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to wash these beaters because we will need them for our egg whites later on, but for now my egg yolks are complete and ready, and we can go back to my main cake. We have returned, and our sugar and butter is very well creamed, so we're going to scrape the sides of the bowl. We're not going to take our paddle off yet though because we're not done adding stuff. But we are definitely going to scrape down the sides of the bowl. Also, now is about the time that I would preheat my oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit or 190 degrees Celsius. And also, while this was beating, I had the opportunity to prepare my egg yolks, which you will have just seen, I believe, in the video. And I had the chance to prepare my cake pan. I'm going to be using, there's a mixer in the way, but I'm going to be using a sheet pan, a cookie sheet pan that I have put cooking paper on the bottom of, and I've cut it to be the exact size of the sheet pan, and then I've used a no-stick baking spray on top of that, and I've never had a cake stick, so it must be working right. So the next thing that we're going to do is to this mixture, we are going to add our prepared egg yolks, our pale, creamy egg yolks, and then we're going to mix that in, and we're going to continue to cream. So we are going to mix for another couple of minutes after we add the egg yolks. The very last thing I had the opportunity to do is I put my vanilla into my little pitcher of milk. So I combine the vanilla extract and the milk, and I also combine the salt, baking soda, baking powder, and flour. We know from other recipes that that takes just a couple of seconds with a fork. So you want to make sure that all of your dry ingredients are combined and that your vanilla and your milk are combined, because those will be the last two things that we add in the bowl here to this batter. So there's my egg yolks. We're going to start on low. Oopsies, I dribbled. We're going to start on low, and then we'll mix on medium-low for probably 2 minutes. There we are. All right, so I didn't speed that up very fast. Didn't need to at all. The final thing that we are going to add to our creamed mixture, the final thing we're going to add is our cooled melted chocolate. Now, of course, you can see my paddle's in my way a little bit. I didn't want to pop it off. No! Because I just want to get some of this mixture off of my paddle. But I do want to try and get that paddle out of the way. So if I turn it the same way as the motor, then I can get it all the way over there and give myself some space. Now all the chocolate goes in, and again, we're going to combine it on low, but we're going to beat it pretty well. We want all of this stuff, all the chocolate, to be very well mixed into our cake batter. Time to mix on low. So we're taking one more step back from our main cake batter in order to prepare the second part of the egg whites. Now you'll notice that my egg whites are in a metal bowl, and you'll also notice that I've got brand new clean beaters. Egg whites are tricky. When we beat them, we're trying usually to make them turn white and become stiff, like whipped cream. But they won't do that if there's anything in the egg whites. If oil gets in there, if water gets in there, if a piece of egg yolk gets in there, then they won't do it. And metal bowls are best because plastic bowls actually have tiny microscopic holes in them, like pores, and oil can get trapped in there and things like that, and then that gets into the egg whites and we don't have our nice fluffy egg whites. So we're going to beat these egg whites on really high speed, as high as we can get our mixer to go, until our egg whites become foamy and stiff. And I'll show you what that means when we're done. So here we go. And I think that looks perfect. Here's how you can tell if they're done. If you get these little mountain peaks and they stay without falling, then your egg whites are finished. So now it's time to finish up this cake batter and take our egg whites back over to the main station. Okie dokie. So, like any of our cake or muffin recipes before, it's really important that when we add our dry ingredients and our wet ingredients, our flour, our baking soda, our baking powder, our salt, our milk, and our vanilla, that we do so alternating. So we're going to put about 1/3 of our flour mixture in here and mix, about 1/3 of our milk and mix, 1/3 of our flour, mix, 1/3 of our milk, mix, and we're going to end on our milk. All right. So now we have an absolutely fantastic cake batter. I'm going to scrape down my paddle. And we're actually finished with our paddle, so we can take this away if we get most of the cake batter off of it. We are going to scrape down the edges of our bowl, which you can see is actually very needed. There's some dry patches down there. And then there's one last thing, if you remember, that we've got to put into this cake batter, and that is our beaten egg whites. That's going to make our cake super duper fluffy. And putting egg whites into anything is actually a little bit difficult because we don't want to squish all the air bubbles out of it. So what we're going to do is smear. We call that folding it in. We want to be so gentle, like we're touching clouds. Now there is our finished cake batter. And now the last thing that we need to do, of course, is put it in our cake pan. Now I'm using this because we're going to end up making this into cake pops, so we don't really care about what shape the cake is in. We just care that it's cake. So what we do, we plop our batter into our cake pan, and handily enough, I have just enough for this cookie sheet in this recipe. So yay. Now we're not just gonna start smearing. We need, at least in my opinion, we need a tool to do this. The tool that I've got is this little guy. This is something that we like to use to decorate cakes as well, but it's really cool because it has this diagonal little edge here, which means that the bottom of the knife can touch stuff while the handle stays out of the mess's way. So what we do is we very slowly and carefully spread our cake batter until it evenly rests in the pan. And that's the trickiest part, is getting the cake layer even. Alright, I'm fairly satisfied that that's all even. The very last thing we're going to do before we put this in the oven is we're going to pick it up and we're going to drop it on the counter like 3 times. I lied, I did it 5. And the reason we're doing that is to get any air bubbles to settle so that we have a nice cake with no bubbles in it. Now it's time to bake. We are going to bake this cake for 20, maybe 25 minutes, and we are looking for a toothpick stuck into the cake to come out clean, or for when our finger is pressed onto the cake for it to be springy and pop back rather than having our fingertips sink into the cake. Alright, so while our cake is baking, it's got about 10 minutes left. This is the perfect time to make our buttercream frosting. For buttercream frosting, it's super duper simple. All that you need is powdered sugar, butter, and milk. And then whatever kind of flavoring you're going to use when you make your buttercream. I am super inspired by the flavors of mint and chocolate, so I'm going to be making peppermint buttercream to mix with my chocolate cake to make a delicious chocolate peppermint little cake ball thing. So what we want to do is we're going to add our butter to our mixing bowl, and it needs to be softened. It really needs to be room temperature, not melted, but super duper soft. And then we need 5 cups, or about 650 grams of powdered sugar. We're going to add half of that, so about 2.5 cups, to the bowl right now. And I'm adding mine straight from these cute little boxes that they sell in Belgium. Super duper handy. Now I may not use all of this powdered sugar, we'll see, because all we want to do is get this mix to the consistency we want it at. And then I'm going to add all of my milk. I'm still using the leftover soy milk that I had. And then, luckily, in this jar, I've already got about a teaspoon or about 5 milliliters of vanilla. I'm going to add all of that because in any buttercream recipe we want to add vanilla. And then I've got something here, peppermint extract. I'm going to add this a half a teaspoon at a time, so that's 2.5 milliliters. A little bit of extract goes a really long way, especially peppermint. It's super strong. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix this all up, and then I've got some tasting spoons here, and we're just going to have to see. Now, normally I would use a paddle for this, but I'm going to use a whisk today, because when you whisk up frosting, the more that you mix it at a higher speed, the fluffier the frosting gets. And we don't want heavy, dense frosting. We want light and fluffy and cloudy frosting. So I'm going to start by making... Oh, he was not latched on. Let's fix that problem, shall we? There we go. I'm going to start by mixing this on low so that I don't spray myself with powdered sugar, and then I'm going to bring it up to medium, and then I'll have to start adding bit by bit more powdered sugar. So now for me this is looking pretty good, even though I probably have another half a cup of powdered sugar I could add. I'm going to taste it now to see if it has enough peppermint in it. Not pepperminty enough for me. So I'm going to add another half teaspoon of the peppermint extract and mix this on medium or medium high and see how she goes. Alright, let's give it another taste and see if our additional half teaspoon did the trick. Yeah, I still want more peppermint. I'm a very pepperminty person. I'm going to be daring, and I'm going to add an entire tablespoon. So that's 2 more spoonfuls. That's a total of 10 milliliters of this stuff. If that doesn't make it taste pepperminty, I don't know what will. Alright, let's see if that did it. More pepperminty, but not enough. I still have a little bit left in my bottle. I'm actually going to be a crazy person and add the rest of the bottle. That's probably another 3/4 of a teaspoon to a teaspoon. And hopefully that'll get it done. Last try. Much better on the peppermint. Not too strong at all, which is really important, but super duper tasty. Now last but not least, because I'm a fun kind of person, I have here yellow and blue food coloring. Shall we make our frosting green? Let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 drops of the yellow, and maybe 2 or 3 drops of the blue. I'm not looking for a bright, bright green here, just a little bit of fun. 1, 2, 3. You always want to use more of the light color than the dark one. Alright. Oh, I got a little blue on my hands. Let's see what color it turns. Now for me, that is an adorable shade of pale green, so I'm going to leave it like that. And what I'm going to do is, I've got about 1 minute left on this cake, so when my alarm goes off, I'll take that out. But for now, I'm just going to leave this to mix on medium-high speed to get as fluffy as possible. You really can't overmix a frosting, so I'm going to let that go. Alright, we have here a finished and beautiful cake. And how do we know that our cake is finished? Well, that's super simple. We take our finger and we press on the cake, and it comes right back up. The other thing that you can do is the toothpick test. I don't have a toothpick right now, but if you were to stick this cake with a toothpick and the toothpick came out clean, then you would see that he's a perfectly done cake. So, we're going to let this cake cool for 10 to 15 minutes, and then we're going to take him out of the pan and let him cool completely. This cake has to be 100% cooled before we can form our cake